What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. So, with the college football playoff coming up, the Heisman finalists, all the awards, now the Heisman winner, they've all been announced recently. So I decided I would go to Twitter and check out what the people were saying, get an idea of how everybody was feeling about the awards, about the playoff selections, all that stuff. And man, did I find some bad takes. I mean, bad college football takes. So, this video will be taking a look at some of the worst bad takes that I saw in just a few minutes on Twitter. And I say just a few minutes because I really couldn't look on the website much longer than I did. It was getting bad. It was getting painful. It was bad. So, this video is just gonna go over looking at those, explaining why I think these takes are just bad takes as a whole. No excuse really for having them. And just explain that. And you guys let me know in the comment section if you agree or disagree with me. Think I'm the one with the bad take, or what you think the worst bad take of this video is. So, that being said, let's go ahead and get into some of these bad college football takes, college football playoff and Heisman edition. So, for our first bad take, we have a tweet here from College Football Nerds, their channel. Also, be sure to watch their channel if you don't. Great channel. Anyway, their tweet is just comparing Will Anderson's numbers side by side with Aiden Hutchinson's numbers. And as you can see here, Will Anderson has 91 tackles, 31.5 tackles for a loss, 15.5 sacks, to Hutchinson's 58 tackles, 15.5 tackles for a loss, and 14 sacks. They say it's not close. Now, that's not the bad take. The bad take is from the top comment here that says, "Not very college football nerd of you to be unable to recognize that comparing a linebacker's and defensive end stats makes zero sense." So, that's the tweet. Now, why is this a bad take? Well, it's a bad take because the author of this tweet is trying to make what they believe to be an educated point about Will Anderson and Aiden Hutchinson being different positions, and that therefore their stats cannot and should not be compared. However, they clearly don't have any knowledge of how a 3-4 defense works versus more of a 4-3 based defense. In Bama's 3-4 defensive scheme, and the 3-4 is a very loose term. They run multiple fronts, I know. But they run base out of a 3-4. Will Anderson is essentially a defensive end. He's a 3-4 outside linebacker. He lines up on the line. He puts his hand in a 3-point stance frequently, and he also rushes out of a 2-point stance frequently. Comparing his numbers to a defensive end is very reasonable. They play very similar positions. The only difference is Will Anderson has some linebacker responsibility, so he will have to drop back into pass coverage every now and then, which would only hurt his numbers. Okay, because if he's not getting to rush the passer every down, like an Aiden Hutchinson is, then he's not getting as many opportunities to get tackles for a loss and sacks. And yet he has more than double his tackle for a loss and more sacks than him. So even if their point was, even taking into account that Will Anderson is an outside linebacker, and so he drops into coverage every now and then, it makes it even more impressive. But honestly, in a 3-4 defense, an outside linebacker is incredibly similar to a defensive end. That's why a lot of times, especially at the NFL level, you'll see 3-4 outside linebackers and 4-3 defensive ends. They're coming out of high school or they're coming out of college. They're just referred to pretty loosely as edge players because they are largely similar. They play on the edges of the defense. You'll figure out kind of how you want to use each one when you get them in, but they are considered to be in the same group of players. This is this case of somebody who has played like a college football video game before, and they know that there are positions that are broken down, and they think that because of that, positions are entirely different from each other. A 3-4 outside linebacker is not the same as a 4-3 outside linebacker. It is much more similar to a defensive end. So, in my opinion, this is just a bad take. Someone who thinks that they know football because they know what the names of positions are, but they really don't know anything about football. Okay, so on to the next bad take. This one is really bad. So let me just read the tweet first. So it says, "Committee blew it again for their product. However predictable the top 4 seeds were. At Alabama football and at Georgia football as a rematch title game is awful for the growth of college football. Last time it happened, it wasn't good, and in 2011, it ended the godforsaken BCS. No TV business acumen at all. All right. This one honestly just infuriates me. Just to be completely honest, this one makes me more mad than any of the other takes in this video will. All right, so just to begin with, the tweet begins by suggesting that the committee got the top 4 wrong, but then has no suggestion as to who they should have put in instead of the 4 that they did. So that's just a little thing that bothers me with a lot of these people that complain about the top 4. They'll say, well, this team doesn't deserve to be in, or this team shouldn't be there, and then not tell you who they think should be in. Doesn't make any sense. But then it gets worse. They suggest that a Bama and Georgia rematch in the national title is terrible for college football. But for that to happen, both teams would have to win their playoff games in the first round, which would then just prove that they were the 2 best teams, and that would then mean that the committee did indeed get it right. And so that point makes 0 sense to me. Like, if Georgia and Bama, or Georgia or Bama, whichever one, if they both don't deserve to be in the playoff, then it should show on the field. When they play, they should lose. And then, boom, problem solved. You're not going to see them in the national championship. But if they go out and they both win, then clearly the committee didn't get it wrong because they both won. It proved they were the better teams. So I don't get it. It makes no sense. But then, none of this, we're not even to the part that makes me mad yet. Then he goes on to say that the committee has no business or TV acumen at all. That's what does it. That's what makes me mad. Who cares about business acumen when picking the best teams? I don't get it. All right, I get that money and sales are what drive the sport, right? But are we seriously going to say that we should pick the college football playoff final teams based upon business acumen and TV sales and not on-field performance? Is that what we're saying? That's what we're saying. If that's what we're saying, then we should just have a team from the West Coast, a team from the Northeast, a team from the Midwest, and a team from the Southeast every year. No matter what the season is, just pick the best team from the West, best team from the South, best team from the Midwest, best team from the Northeast, and just throw them in there. Why? Why would we do that? Why? That's bad for the sport. That's so bad for the sport. This tweet, it encapsulates a lot of what I think is wrong with college football today, and I can't talk about it anymore. I'm done. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. I'll end up going on a whole raging 30-minute rant if I do, so I'm moving on. Now, for our next bad take, we have a tweet in response to the Final Four being announced that says, "How is Cincinnati the only undefeated team not number 1?" All right, so this take is surprisingly common, actually. People think that just because Cincinnati is 13-0, that they should be number 1. And this is an incredibly lazy way to analyze teams. If Georgia, Bama, or Michigan played Cincinnati's schedule, they would all be 13-0 as well. They would be. Lots of teams ranked outside of the top 5 would be 13-0, 12-1, or 11-2 at absolute worst with their schedule as well. Whereas if Cincinnati had Michigan's or Bama's or honestly even Georgia's schedule, there's very, 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 very high chance that they're a 2, 3, even 4-loss team. And if you don't, even if you don't believe me on that, Cincinnati had the 78th ranked strength of schedule compared to Georgia, who's the next lowest. I think they were 32, and that's the next lowest. Michigan and Bama both have even higher strength of schedules than that. So just because they went 13-0 with that schedule does not, under any circumstances, mean that they should be ranked especially above Alabama or Michigan. Now, you can argue about if they should be ranked above Georgia. I don't think they should be, but I think there's an argument to be made there. But there is not an argument to be made that they should be above Michigan, who at 12-1 just won a Power 5 conference championship with wins over teams like Ohio State and then beat Iowa 42-3. No, I'm sorry. Your win over Houston was nice. It wasn't that. No. They should not be above 12-1 Alabama, who just ran through the SEC West and then played the undisputed number 1 team in America and beat them by 17. No. Just because you're undefeated against a bad schedule doesn't mean that you're better than a 12-1 team against a much, much, much tougher schedule. We need to do more analysis of teams than just, well, they're 13-0, so they're number 1. They're 12-1, so they're 2. Well, you can't do that. You can't do that. That's not in the NFL, you can do that because everybody's playing the same quality of teams for the most part. You can't do that in college football, especially Power 5 to Group of 5. You cannot do it. It's just completely lazy, and it's honestly pretty just dishonest with people because the same people who are going to argue and want Cincinnati at number 1 because they're 13-0 will then say that Georgia doesn't belong in the playoff because they haven't played anyone. When Cincinnati also has they've played Notre Dame, but as a schedule, they're still 78th. You could say they haven't played anyone, but because they're undefeated, they should be in. It's just intellectually dishonest at this point. It's very lazy. Bad take. And so we move on to the next bad take, which is somebody tweeted that says, this means yesterday's SEC game was meaningless, and good chance we have to see it again. All right, now this one, I don't know how we got to this point. Can someone please explain to this person that if Georgia won that game, Alabama's not in the playoffs? In which case, how is this game meaningless? Because it was a win or go home for Alabama. So this game had meaning. It certainly had meaning. It also affected the seeding, right, regardless of how you feel about it. There is some meaning to be had there. But the big meaning is that if the result goes the other way, one team doesn't make the playoffs. So therefore, there is clearly meaning there. And then it goes on to say, good chance we're going to see it again, which implies that Georgia and Alabama will both likely win, which would again mean that they are the 2 best teams in the country, and would again mean that the committee got it right, which completely renders your complaint kind of null and void at that point. Bad take. Okay, and now we're on to the next bad take. And this one is a tweet here. It says, they really wanted to avoid the rematch so early, but I don't understand. It's more than likely going to happen anyways. Could have guaranteed 2 different teams in the title game. All right, so now this one doesn't make any sense to me. So they complain about the committee sort of fixing the rankings to avoid a Georgia-Alabama rematch in the first round, which, regardless of if you believe that actually happened or not, that's not important to why this is a bad take, so stick with me here. They then say that instead of fixing it so that Georgia and Bama don't play each other, they should have fixed it so that they do play each other to, quote, guarantee that you don't have those 2 teams in the national championship. So, let me get this straight. You are advocating for the very thing you just complained about. You just complained about fixing the rankings for matchup purposes, and then said that the solution was to just fix the rankings, but in a way that you wanted to see. How does that make any sense? I'm a person, I don't think you should fix the rankings regardless. I think there was probably some implication of they don't want to see Georgia, Alabama play again in the first round. I could be wrong. I don't know. I wasn't in the room. Regardless of if you believe that happened or not, the answer to that problem is not, just fix it the other way because that's what I want to see. No. Why? How about instead of fixing the rankings, we just rank the teams by who we actually think is deserving of each spot and then debate those merits. Debate the merits of where they're actually ranked instead of just trying to rig things one way or another and then complaining if they get rigged in the other way than you wanted them to be. It makes no sense. I don't get it. Bad take. All right, so the next bad take it just lists a top 4, and it says, Michigan should be 1, Georgia 2, Alabama 3, Cincy 4. Do you guys see the problem with this one? Please tell me you guys see the problem with this one. There's a large one. How in the world is Alabama ranked below Georgia? How? This is coming from a Georgia fan. I'm wearing the Georgia shirt. Wearing the Georgia shirt. There's a Georgia fan. They literally just played Alabama. Alabama and Georgia just played. Alabama won by 17. Okay, well, but let's look at resumes then. They have the same record. Bama has a harder strength of schedule. Bama's a conference champion. Georgia's not. They just played. Bama won by 17. They have a head-to-head. Pretty convincing one, too. In what world should Georgia be ranked above them? How? I don't need to explain this one. Come on. You guys know. Come on. Bad take. On to the next bad take. This tweet says, and the SEC bias continues. Sorry, Notre Dame. They know not what they do. All right, this is just a bad take all the way around. I'm not even going to touch on the SEC bias thing. I'm not going to touch on it. We're going to move past it. If I touch on it, people are going to say that I'm just biased with the SEC because I'm a Georgia fan. We could go into the whole thing. We're not going to touch on that. That's not even my big problem with this. I don't even know how to begin to justify putting Notre Dame above Georgia. So here, I'm going to try. So maybe you can begin to argue, well, Georgia lost their conference championship, right? So that means that they shouldn't be in. So then we look, well, how did Notre Dame do in their conference championship game? They didn't play in one because they're not in a conference. So we should just reward Notre Dame for staying home, a team who has 0 ranked wins, and the only ranked team they played, they lost to by double digits, by 11, actually. And then we should punish Georgia for playing a tougher schedule, having 3 ranked wins compared to none, and being far more dominant against poor competition than Notre Dame was when they played poor competition. All because they actually played in a conference championship and lost to another elite team while Notre Dame sat home. Does that seem like a good argument? Because it's not. It's not at all. It's absolutely not. If Notre Dame was a conference champion who played on Conference Championship Saturday, okay. Boom. Okay. Fine. Georgia lost. Notre Dame won. You could make an argument and put Notre Dame in. They didn't. You cannot exclude Georgia on the basis of losing a conference championship and then argue to put Notre Dame in when they didn't play in one. They didn't even play in a conference championship. How can you exclude one team for not having one and then include another team who doesn't have one, who's worse in every other category? What? Notre Dame has no argument to be ranked above Georgia. None. Not in on-the-field dominance, not in ranked wins, not in strength of schedule, not in having a conference championship, or just an overall record. This is just a bad take all the way around. Just bad take. All right, so for our next bad take, we're staying on a similar theme here. This tweet says, garbage to reward Georgia for getting sparked, they meant spanked, I assume, and not winning their conference. Have no place in top 4. All right, so here's the big problem with this one. I've touched on this already this video. Who do you think should go in instead of Georgia? You didn't deign to tell us who should go in instead of Georgia. You see, the thing with a playoff ranking in college football is it's very comparative. You see, because you can say, oh, well, Georgia, they don't deserve to be in. But then the problem is that you still need another team to get in, so you have to compare them to another team that you're going to say should be in. And they don't do that. There isn't another team. I just explained to you why Notre Dame has no argument to be in. It's not even close to having an argument. So then who? Who passed them? Baylor? 2-loss Baylor. That's the next best team that has an argument, even though they're not the next ranked team. They have Ohio State, who you certainly can't argue for, with 2 losses and not being a conference champion. Whose losses are, well, you could argue the Michigan loss is a better loss than the Alabama loss was for Georgia. Kind of even to me. The Oregon loss is worse. and Georgia doesn't even have a second loss. So you can't argue Ohio State. So Baylor, we'll assume Baylor, 2-loss Baylor. That's who they want to argue for. Well, here's the problem with the 2-loss Baylor story. They lost to a bad TCU team. They also lost to a good Oklahoma State team, and they did avenge that loss, although it doesn't entirely make up for it. Meanwhile, UGA only lost one game to an Alabama team that is better than both Oklahoma State and TCU. Georgia has also been far more dominant this season. They have the same number of ranked wins, although admittedly Baylor's are against higher ranked teams. Still, same number of ranked wins, so in a pretty similar strength of schedule ranking. They also have a better record. Now, if Baylor didn't lose to TCU, okay, I would agree you should put them above Georgia. But they did lose to TCU. And so you have now 2-loss Baylor versus 1-loss Georgia. I mean, Georgia has a very similar resume, but they also have one less loss. Their loss is better, by far, than both of Baylor's losses, and they have been the more dominant on-the-field team. Baylor was, 7th or 9th, maybe? I think they were 9th coming into the weekend. I could be wrong. I think they finished at 6th or 7th, maybe. I'm not sure. One of those. The point is, it's not a good argument when you have the TCU loss. You can't. When you lose to TCU, you lose your ability to say, oh, well, they didn't win their conference, so we should go in above them because we did. You lost to TCU. You also lost to Oklahoma State. Sorry. You're not in above Georgia. This is, again, bad take. All right, for our next bad take, we have another one of these top fours, and you'll notice a similar problem that the last one had. If the playoff weren't rigged, 1 Michigan, 2 Cincy, 3 Georgia, 4 Bama. All right, let's not mention the fact that Cincy should not be above Alabama in any world that you do. They shouldn't be. They absolutely should be. We've already touched on this in another one. They should not be. We're also not going to mention the inconsistency of saying Michigan should be above Cincinnati, but Alabama shouldn't. I believe both should be above, but if you're going to make the argument that Michigan should, all the things that you're going to use to argue that Michigan is more deserving of the top spot than Cincinnati are the same arguments that Alabama has. You just don't like Alabama, so you don't think they should be higher. But seriously, here's the real issue. Let's skip over those problems. How is Georgia above Alabama? How? I've explained it. I already explained this once. I'm not going to do it again. But honestly, how do people think this? I had to put it on here twice because this is not the only 2 times I saw this. There are multiple people who apparently think that Georgia should be ranked above Alabama. And I don't know what to do with that information, to be honest with you. Just all around bad take. Okay, so our next bad take is a string of bad takes. It starts by saying Cincy got robbed. Somebody replies asking what they got robbed of. They then say, should be number 1 instead of all the shuffling of the deck to get 2 SEC schools in is ridiculous. It should be Cincy, Michigan, Bama, Notre Dame. Georgia should be out. Somebody then replies again, says, LOL, Notre Dame didn't beat a single ranked team, to which this same person replies, who did Georgia beat? Okay, all right, okay. Let's begin. Let's just take this step by step. First off, no, Cincy did not get robbed. They didn't. We've gone over why Cincy, just because they're undefeated, should not be number 1. They didn't get robbed. Moving on. Secondly, how do you have Notre Dame in above Georgia? How? We've gone over this too. We've gone over this again. I'm not going to, but the whole argument for Georgia not being in is they don't have a conference championship. Neither does Notre Dame. They don't. Okay, I've explained that one already. I'm not doing it again. It's dumb. Oh, it's dumb. It hurts me. But then. Okay, then somebody calls him on this and reminds him, as I have, Notre Dame doesn't have a single ranked win. Not one. Not a one. To which he replies, who did Georgia beat? Okay, here's the problem with that. Ignoring the fact that Georgia does have 3 ranked wins compared to Notre Dame's none, you just advocated for putting in Notre Dame, who hasn't beat anyone. And when confronted with the fact that Notre Dame hasn't beat anyone, you said, yeah, well, I mean, Georgia hasn't beaten that many good teams either, so that means Notre Dame should still be in. It's fine. Why is it okay for Notre Dame to not beat anyone, but it isn't okay for Georgia to not beat anyone, even though they've beat 3 ranked teams versus Notre Dame's none? There's no consistency. It's just, what can I say to make myself feel better about there not being 2 SEC teams in? It's all it is. It's just making stuff up to try to say, I don't want 2 SEC teams. If you don't want 2 SEC teams, then just say it. Just say that. Don't make up things to try to argue your way into it. It just makes you look dumb. It does. Another bad take. Okay, and now we move on to the final of the bad takes. I'm just going to read this one. Just going to read the tweet first. Tweet goes, an obvious conspiracy by a college football playoff committee and the SEC. They are banking on Bama rolling Cincy, so they move them to Texas. Georgia and Michigan get sent to the southernmost U.S. city, obvious Georgia advantage travel-wise, in hopes to have an all-SEC final. Duh. Okay. This person must be painfully unaware that the committee doesn't choose the locations. No, they don't. You see, all the New Year's Six Bowls, they're all on a rotation, so that way they all get to be a part of the playoff, right? And then, of the rotation, the number 1 team, whoever is the number 1 seed, regardless of who it is, it's not just Alabama, whoever the number 1 seed is, they get to pick where they want to play their game. That's the whole benefit of being the 1 seed. You get to pick where you play. Alabama picked Dallas, probably because it's at an indoor stadium. The national championship this year is at an indoor stadium. Also, Miami is full of distractions. They don't want to deal with that. Okay, makes sense. That leaves Miami for the other game. That's the only other place it can be, because it's the Orange Bowl's turn to be in the playoff. There's no SEC conspiracy. It has nothing to do with an SEC conspiracy. No. The national championship is in Indy this year. Well, that's a Big Ten conspiracy right there. Have the national championship in Big Ten territory. No. Nobody's saying that, because that's a dumb thing to say. Why? Oh, God. Just, please, before any of you go online and just spout off nonsensical stuff like this, just make sure you know at least how the process actually works before just making up a new conspiracy theory that the playoff committee and the SEC are just in bed together and they just rigged it. They were just like, I wonder what city we could send the Georgia-Michigan game to. Oh, Miami. That's the one. Yeah, that's it. No. Bad take. Anyway, that'll do it for this video of college football bad takes, because I couldn't handle or bear to see any more of these online. It was actually causing me physical pain at this point to see some of these takes that people have. Just, oh, wow. Had to stop it there. Couldn't go anymore. Anyway, with that being said, if you guys have made it this far in the video, let me know which bad take was the worst in your opinion down below. Or again, if I'm the one with the bad takes, tell me. I'm perfectly willing to have a debate and admit, I'm wrong sometimes. So, go ahead, debate with me in the comment section if you think that I'm wrong and that some of these guys were right. Also, go ahead, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you've made it this far, because it helps me out a lot, and I'll be making loads more college football content in the future. With all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.